Hi, welcome to the Emergency Home Learning Conference. Today we interview Nicole Colter, the founder of Create Your Own School, as well as two teams involved in the project. We look so forward to this interview. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Gina.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. So I always ask guests to introduce themselves. So Nicole, I'm going to have you introduce yourself first, and then I'll have Hannah and Sanat go.
Okay, so yes, thank you. My name's Nicole Colter, and I was an entrepreneur turned an education innovator, and now I studied creativity and finished my studies a few years ago, and at the same time I was studying self-directed education. So at this point I am working to build the kinds of infrastructure that I think can support more people into embracing self-directed education so they can nurture creativity.
I love the combination. I love that self-directed learning and creativity combination. I think that's incredible. Awesome. So we'll hear more about your work.
Mm-hmm.
And Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I have been homeschooled my whole life. I graduated in January 2020. And it was really through a process of helping to create the student council at my distributed learning school in Canada that I developed a passion for facilitating learning in other students. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to pursue that. And I'm now living with my family in Costa Rica.
So nice. So I want to talk about that. Have you always traveled?
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm so happy you're here. And Sanat.
Hi, I'm Sanat. I actually have a different path than Hannah in terms of I haven't been homeschooled per se or unschooled, but I've attended public school basically all my life so far. And currently I'm a senior in a public high school. But I'd say most of my sort of self-directed learning has come outside of school, and most of my learning, honestly, has come through pursuing projects. Joining communities and things I'm interested in, like sustainability, journalism, entrepreneurship, education, things like that. And so I worked at a local environmental nonprofit as like a student lead, basically helping students work on policy and advocacy in our area. So that was a great experience to learn how advocacy works and learn about policy, learn about sustainability, things like that. And then I worked as part of my school newspaper, which is still under my school, but it was a lot more self-directed than other things. So there I got to experience journalism and like investigate things, investigate issues that I was interested in learning more about, like housing and stuff like that. And now more recently, I've started a podcast called 21st Century Visionary, which is more about empowering other youth to take their own education in their hands and mostly focused on entrepreneurship. So I'm sort of learning entrepreneurship through talking to young people who are doing that and learning about change making and things like that. So, and also, as you mentioned, I serve as an education adventure guide and Create Your Own School. So that's sort of my background.
Amazing. So I think like everyone always wants to know whether you've learned outside school through homeschooling or unschooling, or whether you're actually learning outside school, right? How does that work in structure? So I'm going to have Hannah go first.
I feel like homeschooling, it really provides a very different experience. And unschooling is very different than homeschooling. I think a lot of people see that difference as unschooling being not enrolled within any kind of program. Homeschooling, which is what I was enrolled in a school based in Canada. I got my high school diploma, but it was all done through communication with a learning consultant, all done through family and experience learning, as opposed to courses and teachers.
And so what did your average day, because this is what people always ask, what did your average day look like?
When I was a kid, it was whatever we were doing that day. And I hate to say that because that's not helpful, but I remember when we were little, our my mom would take us shopping, and we would, add up the amounts of things, or we would do art projects, or we would just whatever was really interesting that day. As we went into high school, we had to actually earn course credits in order to earn the high school diploma. So there was a little bit more structure, but every day was still, you know, which part of the project do I want to work on? What's a personal project that I might want to work on? How do I want to structure my week? Like, there's a lot of flexibility in how I wanted to learn.
That's probably the best part, right? Was it yeah, it's the flexibility. Fantastic. And then Sanat, how did you learn outside school while going to school?
Yeah. So like as I mentioned in my bio, there's mostly through joining communities and also finding mentors, which kind of go hand in hand. And I know we'll get more into that probably later in the conversation, but that's been like the major force in learning things outside of school, because obviously I think even if you're doing something that's not part of like education or the education system, it does provide you with like a community of learners, like it's supposed to, at least, so of people passionate about that project. So I think that part of the experience is really important to replicate. And so when I learned, say, environmental sustainability, that was through joining an organization that was with other students that were also part of that movement, and then basically gaining insights from all their different the different things they were doing, and just learning from the community. And also we had mentors who were working in like policy. Like one of them was the campaign manager for one of the superintendents in our area. So she really guided us like on what types of policy we could pursue, and like educated us on the different types of policies. So that was really useful. But it also allowed us to, like, it was a youth-led organization, so we could take the initiative to decide like what actions we wanted to pursue, what we were interested in. So it wasn't like structured like, oh, our mentor would just like tell us what to do and we had to do it. She kind of just guided us through it, and then we had the opportunity to make our own decisions.
I love it. And Nicole, you can expand on that. I think that sometimes people find difficulty in separating learning from education. And I know the teens wanted to talk about this as well. But everyone sees, and you guys could all talk about it together, everyone sees like, here's school and here's where all the learning is done. So it's hard to imagine learning outside this concept of school. But Sanat, you've obviously done it. And Hannah, that like life and learning kind of combine together. So I guess the question is then, what is learning versus what is education? And how does school take part in it or not?
I really like the way you set up that question. I really like to think about the difference as education is like a grocery store. Okay, so it's this framework, right? It's this building that has the opportunity to offer you all kinds of things. So when you walk into the grocery store, you get to then choose what you want to take out of it. So hopefully you go into education and you manage to collect some of the things you need and some things that you actually want. And when you leave the store, that's what you've learned. The things that you've acquired is what you've learned. And that's what you get to take home, is what your education is.
I love that analogy so much.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. So let's talk about that more, because I think that what Hannah says is so important, right? Like there's so many options and so many choices. And so like some you kind of have to buy, right? Like you need like milk and eggs. And then the rest are sort of like what you take and what you need. So let's talk about that more. So interesting. I love that, Hannah.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, when Hannah shared that analogy, I loved it, obviously, and I think that what, at this time, let's just ground it a little bit in where we are right now. Not, I had worked in a high school for 5 years, so I saw the students inside who really considered this their supermarket and the only place they were shopping, and weren't taking very much away because they just weren't interested in it. We don't walk into a supermarket and pick up things we don't like. We don't choose to pay our money, or our attention. We don't choose to bring it home and then spend a whole lot of time with it, ingesting it, right? So if you keep that analogy going, you realize that, the way that education can right now be set up, and especially with the pandemic change, I think there could be a lot of people who aren't as happy with the way the supermarket is set up anymore, and it's really even harder to find things that they like. And so, the one thing that I'd like to add to what Hannah, because you mentioned the context of how does school fit into it, right? And most people might consider school like the supermarket, right? But really, the system of all of education includes that there are these different markets you could go to. And the learning is what we're focused on. Like if we just focus and say well, it's not the only thing we're focused on, because we know that people learn best when they're in social situations. Like me and you, Gina, have talked about, autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Relatedness is so huge. And if you don't have, Sanat's touched a little bit on community, but I think both of them have experienced community being a way that has drawn them deeper into their learning, because it not only provides the learning, but it starts to create the connections, the other relationships, the people that you want to work with, the people that you can learn from. Even someone who's not that much older, they can learn from each other. And I think, when you look at the way school is structured, it becomes a very, teacher to student learning and less focus on peer-to-peer learning. So like, I'm all about peer-to-peer learning. I'm all about finding young people who want to actually do these kinds of things and learn outside, and whether they're in school like Sanat and want to just, take their own initiatives to do things, or Hannah, who's now sort of figuring out her next step and deciding what she wants to do. It's like, there's tons of teenagers and young people out here who, I think people look at them sometimes and see disengaged, and I see like a school and an environment that's not meeting their creative needs, and who, if they were if they knew how to find their communities and connect to other people who were wanting to like learn outside of school, even if they still go to school every day, that they could really develop during their high school years, instead of just waiting to get a piece of paper, believing like that's the path to a successful, happy future. Because we know it's not. It's, the piece of paper doesn't do that job. The job has to get done some other way. So
I am blown away by this grocery store analogy, and I'll tell you why now, right? Because now I'm thinking, okay, so you have the grocery store, and a lot of people think that school is the actual store. But I'm thinking like, one of the things I've always gotten my food from is like the community supported agriculture program in my town. So we get food directly from a farmer, right? And so now I'm thinking of an extension of that grocery store, right? Another alternative is to go to your farmer or go to your community and get the food that community or farmer has grown. And this is like pretty similar probably to what you guys are doing now with Create Your Own School. Am I correct?
yeah, so I mean, I just am reading Sir Ken Robinson's book, Your Child in School, and I loved his definition of school was just any community of people who come together to learn with and from each other. And so, in our case, I'm saying parents may not have ever realized that they were always running a school, because their home is a learning place. Your children learn more from, your example, the culture in your home. And then when you take it to teenagers, saying like, we could form our own communities and we can learn from each other and we can learn what we want to learn, at this time, I just think that it's important to to provide easier access to that path. Because I know I live in a rural area, whereas Sanat's in the San Francisco Bay Area. Like, I mean, he's obviously got, a lot more, within his local geography than the teens in my area, but I'd love to he can connect them to conversations. He could talk more about tile too. That would be cool. Yeah, so I think that that's what we're working towards.
So the create your own school structure, then, is it a place or is it a concept that you want to spread? I guess what's the mission is the question.
Do you want me to keep taking these, or do one of you want to speak on since you've been involved? I could definitely, I'll start by saying it started out for me with the fact that I'll just let you know, I met both of these people inside of Akimbo. Seth Godin created these Akimbo workshops. So they're online learning community workshops. And when I happened to join one at the beginning of the pandemic, well, right before the pandemic hit, and that's where I met Sanat in mid-April and then Hannah in early September. And just seeing how if you put up a sort of online community space and say, what we want to have happen here is people who are talking about either making change in education, which is what we're sort of really focused on, but others like parents or teens who want to say, because I know that there's like Facebook groups in every community that you could connect to people, you need to connect to people. But a lot of times it just becomes another way to get someone else's map for how you're supposed to do it. You're listening to the people who have done it because you trust that they're like know more than you. And my sort of stance is that no one knows you and your family better than you. And what I do as a creative thinking facilitator is actually get you to get comfortable creating something of your own design, because you have the answers in you. You know what you want, you know what you like, what you don't, what your kids like and don't want. And I want it to be like kind of a playful exploratory space so that, these two are going to start to imagine what a teen only space is going to look like, but it's still going to be modeled on connecting through an online community workshop. So you're workshopping your own school design.
I love it. And I love the message. You know what's best for your child. You know what's best for you if you're a teen or a young adult. And you have to run with that. You have to be authentic to what you feel is best. And that's what I think your community provides, like that following your heart type philosophy. That's so awesome. Okay, so now I want to ask you in terms of creation, because this is the create your own school forum, right? So in terms of creation, then how is creation part of learning?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a very integral part of learning because until you create something, I don't think you can really say that you've 100% mastered what you like have learned. Even once you create it, of course, you haven't mastered it per se, but I'd say that's like the pinnacle of learning in a way, is if you're able to create something that that conveys what you've learned, then I mean, your learning can't really be like you know for sure that you kind of have a really good solid understanding of it. So for example, what I've been doing with the podcast has been sort of creating, you can say, these conversations or creating the podcast itself. Like Nicole mentioned, we met in the Akimbo workshop, and that was a place where we learned how to do podcasting or how to become a podcaster through the process of creating one. Like it wasn't, oh, here's your curriculum, and then you absorb this, and then maybe one day you'll create a podcast. It was like we went through the process of creating the podcast while we're learning all this material. We immediately got this knowledge, and then we implemented it. We got feedback from the people involved in the community. So it's learning and creation go like really hand in hand. And if you just learn something and you don't really have an output, I think you pretty much forget that information very quickly. It also motivates you to learn. It keeps you engaged with your learning because then you know what your end goal is. You know how you're going to use that learning right after. So I know like Hannah has a blog, for instance, where she's able to convey what she's learned. So that's another great way of just a very simple way of creating is just basically teaching that information to someone else or teaching that information to other people. That forces you to simplify it, to think more deeply about it, come up with your own conclusions. So yeah, that's why I think it's really important.
I love that, right? Because I'm thinking of the learning cycle and I'm thinking of like the learning and the integration of learning and even the assessment of learning, which comes from like hearing back your podcast or in Hannah's case, reading back posts from your blog, and really thinking of that as like a self-reflective assessment and how important that is to the learning process. That's awesome. All right, I want to start with Hannah and I want to start with talking about then. So you all, or Nicole and Sanat attended this workshop, and through this workshop, you learned all these different things. So I want to segue then into learning from others, right? Or learning from mentors or doing an apprenticeship. So Hannah, if you want to start there and the importance of that, that would be great.
I am such a huge believer in the importance of mentors. And partly that is because of the way I was homeschooled. You know, we did not have teachers who gave lectures and tests. We had educators who were mentoring all of their learners. So people who were passionate about a certain subject and would actually answer your questions on it. You know, I had a favorite teacher who was my English teacher, but also passionate about, you know, Indigenous studies and creative writing and all kinds of interesting things. And we were able to have real conversations. And I think that's really the key, is being able to have real conversations and, like Sanat said, be able to draw your own conclusions. I really like that it's a process of creating an understanding that creates learning on a deeper level. And while it is wonderful to have peer-to-peer learning, I think it is equally important to have someone who does know a little bit more, who does think differently than you, who is able to offer insight that maybe you didn't think of before. And just having that as a part of a community is just really important.
I love it. That's perfect. Like the power of the authentic conversation and the power of real mentorship. Sanat, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, I definitely just would echo the same things about having mentors. And I know like Nicole's been a really like we've had like a mentee mentor relationship just from the Akimbo workshop, and it's been so powerful, at least for me. And I know she's mentioned for her as well, like being able to work on this project together. I don't know if I would have been able to like keep going with the podcast, grow it to where it is now, without having her insights and feedback. And then now working on Create Your Own School. And I've had so many like different insights that I wouldn't have thought of if we weren't working together. So for example, like in the podcast, um, I've been not just focused on entrepreneurship or interviewing people about their business, but kind of deviating a bit more into how they learn as well, like and how they learned entrepreneurship, trying to like get more insight into how they self-directed that process and stuff like that, because of learning Nicole's and like getting her philosophy on community as a curriculum, stuff like that. It just really informed my the way I've been learning, the way I've been podcasting, the way I've been having conversations, stuff like that. And yeah, I just think that having a mentor who has more experience, like they can give you like even on the technical aspects of growing the business, like Nicole has been helping me formulate like how I want to um, start growing the community. So for example, initially I just had a podcast, But then she encouraged me to like start making it more of a community, and I started getting I made a Facebook group, started getting people involved with that, and I'm still working on growing that. So yeah, we've been discussing that part of it, like having discourse, using that as another platform. Um, so I think basically those insights that she has as someone who's been in the space for a long time has really helped me grow my own podcast, I think.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Nicole, I can imagine what an amazing mentor she is. I can just imagine how lucky you guys are. All right, so I want to segue into the end portion of this segment, and that's talking about how learning is different for all and how people do learn in different ways. So I want you to integrate your experience into the response for this question, how you've learned in different ways, and also how you see others learning in different ways. So I'm going to go in the order of the people on my screen. So I'll have Hannah first, and then Nicole, and then Sanat.
Um, okay, I think that sometimes there is a perception that homeschooling isn't for everyone. And that's very true. There are obviously different kinds of families, different kinds of situations. This is not an option for everyone. But I don't think it's because of the learning style. I think it's because of the lifestyle. You know, obviously there are situations where that doesn't work, but it's not because your learner, your kids, your students, whatever, couldn't benefit from it. And what homeschooling has that traditional schooling doesn't is flexibility, like I said earlier. But that's flexibility in all ways. You know, that's in scheduling, but that's also in focus. You know, your day isn't broken up into, you know, we have 1 hour of math and then the next hour of English. It's what are you happy doing today? What are you interested in? What do you want to learn more about? So being able to actually delve into a subject or into an idea, or, you know, just wonder a really simple question and just follow it and see where it goes. That's a freedom that isn't offered in traditional schooling. And I think equally important is the ability to express learning in different ways. And, you know, because some kids are going to want to get up and create a musical performance about some historical figure that they learned about. And some people are going to want to write an essay, and some are going to want to draw a picture, and some are going to make a podcast, and that's fine. Right? There's no reason to make everyone do a fill in the blank test. That's not how people are going to learn. And I think the most important thing is being able to identify how an individual wants to express their learning and allowing them to do that.
Awesome. That's so brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. Nicole.
So for me, I guess, you know, I already had my bachelor's before I started my own businesses, but I noticed very clearly the difference that I felt in how I was learning when it was for the fact that what I was learning, I could put to immediate use. I could get the feedback cycle. And so this aspect of like, even with, you know, what both I hear them sharing is this authentic audience kind of thing too. The natural conversation, the, you know, putting things out into the world. So for me, you know, I've said entrepreneurship, I realized is self-directed education. Like there's no way to really do it without self-directing. And so I learn best that way. Like it's experimental. You know, I'll just, I also use my imagination a lot, which is, you know, a very creative entrepreneurial thing. Like you have to create it in your head before you could create it in the world. So you're trying to put all these pieces together. And, you know, I think that there are, in the examples that Hannah gave, like, you know, whether it's to build, you know, I mean, think about Hamilton and how he had to imagine all that. I mean, it must have taken years, you know, and for all we know, some of it, and I haven't heard the full story, but some of that stuff can go back to young ages where they're amazed by something and want to dig deeper into it. And I just think that we need to really notice those things as parents, or let teens notice. When I encounter teens that have no idea what they're passionate about. And I encounter them all the time, you know, teens and young adults and even older. And just to be able to create, you know, learning experiences that provide that is really what I'm passionate about, because I was blessed to have that, whether it was through my own business and then, you know, through my master's program was very much designed as a create your own stuff to prove that you can become this change agent you're seeking to become. Like you had to create things, you know, and so for me, creating and teaching what you already know just puts you in a very different posture. It's a more empowering posture, you know, and I think that that's what we really need. At least I need it, and I've seen others need it, and that's my goal is to provide it. So.
And it's not learning differently, or everyone is different in the way that they learn. What do you think?
Mm. Yeah, I definitely think that, I mean, that has to be true. I don't think everyone learns the same. And obviously the education system, that's probably the biggest problem is like you have, um, you're giving everyone the same curriculum, the same structure, everything's like very standardized, and it kind of has to be because of the nature of it. So the only way to get an education which you can, which will, which you know will be suited to your needs, to your to actually helping you learn what you need to learn and learn best, is to take initiative over it. You can't really rely on the education system to give you exactly what you need or want. So I think basically what's really helped me, and it's really hard to have that mindset shift once you're like in the system for so long. You kind of just are, I mean, it really trains you to just go with the flow. And I mean, that's another big problem, not just that you're not really learning, but you're being trained to follow instructions and not really think for yourself. But once you break out of that mindset, I mean, there is a lot you can learn from school. I mean, going along with that grocery store analogy, there's a lot you can pick up from your education. I wouldn't say that, you know, even though I said that school hasn't really, I've learned more outside of school. I mean, I definitely, when I had the mindset shift of trying to learn and trying to be intentional about what I'm learning instead of just checking the boxes, I was able to see like what was actually valuable and focus more time on those parts of school and really prioritize, like if there's an AP Gov project where I'm able to actually dive into policy, then I'm more interested in that. And I think that's going to be more beneficial for me. So I'm going to spend more time on that versus maybe like a physics class where, you know, I can't really apply the knowledge. So yeah, just identifying in school what you're intrinsically motivated to learn, what you think is going to benefit you, and then also outside of school, seeking opportunities to learn that. I think that's just the best way to make sure that you're getting everything you need.
I love that, right? Because all three of you, I mean, it's a great message. You get to choose your own adventure, really, truly, whether it be homeschool or world school or unschool or school. And to take that and choosing your own adventure, then you are leaning into your intrinsic motivations and strengths and interests. And no one could ever ask for anything more. I mean, that's amazing. Um, so in talking about creating your own adventure, Nicole, if you want to say anything or any last things about create your own school, and then I'll have everyone just express how people can find you guys, where they would want. I want to hear about your podcast, and then I want to hear about your blog, Hannah, and I want to hear about create your own school from Nicole. So Nicole, do you want to go first and talk about create your own school and where people can find you?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so we have the website createyourownschool.com. There's a join page, which we're doing a pilot where it's just inviting people to apply to sort of, it's an easy application, but we just want to get a group of people to kind of help us round out the way that it's going to work. As I said, Sanat and Hannah are two of the education adventure guides, but we have a pretty good team of other educators and a life coach. So there's 6 of us currently, and the intention is to, like I said, allow people to kind of guide themselves through, or we'll help guide them through some prompts to pull out what's in them and what they really want and how, what would make them come alive. And I want to encourage people that, if you are already homeschooling or you're considering that, great. But even if you're just like curious and say, like, I want to awaken my creativity and kind of think about what's possible, there's really that imagination, that possibility thinking and acting as if is so powerful. And so, and Hannah and Sanat will start to, inside the space, work through the prompts themselves to imagine what, like I said, what a teen sort of online learning community would really look like, because they know, but they're going to want other teens to hear from too. So we definitely want to encourage teens to join us in that space to play around together. So, and that's the main place to find me. I also have a website, NicoleColter.com, where, it kind of talks about my background in creativity and my portfolio there. Because I have done the sort of studies and research and written a lot on creativity and self-directed education. And yeah, those are the main places.
Amazing.
Great job.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. I'm gonna go to the websites and everything. Hannah.
You can find me. My blog is kwhatnow.com. It's QUEWHATNOW. There is a story behind the name, but you have to go to the website to find it. And all of my socials are at kwhatnow.
Awesome. Thank you. I can't wait to find your blog. And Sanat.
Yeah. So my podcast that I mentioned is 21st Century Visionary. Just 21st is not spelled out. It's the letters 2-1 and then ST. That might be confusing. And then yeah, you can find that on Apple Podcast, Spotify, like all the listening platforms, or just if you Google it, you should be able to find it. And then you can, probably the best place to reach out to me is LinkedIn. And if you just search up my name, you can find my profile there. But also on other social platforms, yeah, it's just my name pretty much. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, I wish you all the best. Thanks for spending time with us today. You've been amazing. And again, it's createyourownschool.com.
Yes. And my socials are all at Nicole Colter. See how you pick up on them. They're mentoring me. I sent that to Sanat. Like, everyone needs to have these young people keeping them, I would not know how to live stream, things with all the stuff across the bottom. He's doing all kinds of crazy, awesome things. And Hannah has helped write so much she's a phenomenal writer. You what?
I just write your outlines.
Yeah, she writes my outlines because I can't do outlines. Ever since high school, they made me panic, and I've been very honest. You got to be honest about your strengths and honest about your weaknesses. Outlines are not my thing. So she's my outline helper. She's that part of the team. So thank you.
Just to give credit where credit is due, Hannah did create the outline for this interview, and it was amazing. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time so much.
Thank you, Gina.